If a modern U.S. Marine rifle platoon time-traveled to the 13th century and came face-to-face with the Mongol horde, who would win? A tiny tactical unit with devastating firepower, or a historically horrific force that conquered everything from Korea to Hungary? Let's break down what each side brings to this fight. The forces. The Marine Rifle Platoon consists of 43 soldiers, organized into 3 squads. They're equipped with M4 carbines and M27 infantry automatic rifles, 3 M240B medium machine guns capable of firing 950 rounds per minute, M320 grenade launchers, M67 fragmentation grenades, and various optical equipment, including scopes, night vision goggles, and infrared targeting systems. Each Marine carries roughly 210 rounds of ammunition as a standard combat load, though they often carry more. They also have body armor, Kevlar helmets, tactical radios for coordination, and basic medical supplies. Their combat load? Somewhere around 60 to 80 pounds per person. Now, on the Mongol side, a Tumen represents 10,000 warriors, organized into units of 10, 100, and 1,000, with strict hierarchical command. Each warrior is a skilled horseman, trained from childhood. They carry a composite bow capable of accurate shots up to 300 yards and effective area fire out to 500 yards or more. They also carry sabers, lances, and sometimes lassos for close combat. The Mongols have multiple horses per warrior, typically 3 to 5, allowing them to stay mobile for extended periods. Their forces include heavy cavalry with armor and light cavalry scouts. Historically, Mongols carried dried meat and fermented mare's milk, giving them an incredible operational range. They're masters of feigned retreats, encirclement tactics, and coordinated massed arrow volleys. Now, if we're being completely honest about terrain, the setup matters tremendously. Open steppe grasslands would favor Mongol mobility. Dense forests would limit cavalry effectiveness. For this analysis, let's assume rolling plains with some vegetation, ground that allows both cavalry maneuvers and marine defensive positioning. The climate would be temperate, not extreme desert or Arctic conditions that would stress marine supplies. Scenario 1. The shock factor. History gives us a pretty clear answer for what would happen in the first scenario. When technologically superior forces encounter armies that have never seen their weapons before, psychological shock usually determines the outcome faster than combat capability. Take the Spanish conquest of the Aztecs. Cortés had fewer than 1,000 men, but had firearms and horses that the Aztecs had never encountered. The psychological impact of gunfire, the seemingly magical ability to kill from impossible distances, and the thunderous noise created panic. The Mongols, for all their tactical brilliance, have never faced firearms. The first time Marines open fire at 400 yards and Mongol warriors start dropping from their horses with no visible projectile, no arrow flight to track, just instant death followed by the crack of gunfire, that's going to create massive confusion. When grenade launchers start landing 40mm explosions in cavalry formations, killing multiple warriors at once with each detonation, it would look like sorcery. The Mongols might interpret this as divine intervention or demon magic. Though we also need to take into account that Chinese gunpowder weapons did not stop the Mongols from conquering China. That being said, the initial Mongol assault would most likely break apart as units flee in terror. Even the legendary Mongol discipline and organization would struggle against an enemy that kills invisibly from beyond their own maximum effective range. The psychological warfare effect would be devastating. So most likely, the remains of the Mongol Tumen would retreat after taking heavy losses, and the Marines would win the battle, but still be stuck in the 13th century. But this scenario, too boring. So let's make this more interesting by assuming the Mongols have somehow been warned. Perhaps they've encountered a smaller Marine unit before, captured some Marines, and examined their weapons and equipment. They don't understand how the weapons work, but they know the Marines can kill from very far away. Their weapons make loud noises, but there are only 43 of them. The Mongol commanders, being tactical geniuses, would plan accordingly. So, let's get to the good stuff.
Scenario 2. The Mongols know what's coming. The first major factor we need to consider: mobility. A Marine rifle platoon is designed to operate as part of a larger combined arms force, with vehicle support, artillery backup, and air superiority. Alone on an open plain, they're a light infantry unit with limited mobility, maybe 3 to 4 miles per hour on foot over extended periods, less if they're in full combat load. The Mongols, by contrast, can cover 60 to 80 miles per day on horseback, and in emergencies, by switching between multiple horses, they could push even harder for shorter periods. This means the Mongols fundamentally control when and where contact happens. The Marines can't run away from 10,000 mounted warriors. If the Marines try to retreat, the Mongols simply follow at a distance, slowly closing in, never committing to a charge until the conditions are perfect. This is actually how the Mongols defeated many armies historically. They'd pursue for days or even weeks, exhausting the enemy before delivering the final blow. The Marines' best chance? Find defensible terrain and force the Mongols to come to them. Let's say they find a position on elevated ground, with rocks or trees providing some cover from arrow fire, with clear fields of fire extending 400 to 500 yards. They set up overlapping fields of fire for their machine guns, establish firing positions, and prepare for the Mongol assault. Here's where the numbers get interesting. Each Marine needs to account for roughly 233 Mongol warriors. Even with modern weapons, that's a daunting ratio. Let's crunch the combat math. The M240B machine guns are the key weapons here, with a rate of fire around 950 rounds per minute, and needing to reload every 100 rounds, which takes about 5 seconds. A single machine gunner could theoretically fire sustained bursts for extended periods. But barrel overheating becomes an issue after several hundred rounds. Let's say each machine gunner can effectively engage for 60 seconds before needing a barrel change, managing about 800 to 900 rounds in that time. Against massed cavalry, even with a hit rate of only 20% due to movement and distance, that's 160 to 180 Mongols per machine gun per minute of sustained fire. The M4 carbines and M27 rifles are effective out to 500 yards, well within ballistic reach, especially with their optics. Here's where things get interesting for the Mongols. At 500 yards, before any serious cavalry charge can develop, the Marines can engage with devastating long-range fire. While the Mongols are positioning, organizing, and preparing, the Marines can inflict catastrophic early casualties. The sheer volume of fire, potentially 10,000 rounds at this stage, would completely disorganize Mongol formations, cause fear and panic, and shatter unit cohesion. And here's something crucial. Mongol commanders and officers dressed distinctly from regular warriors. Their elaborate armor would make them visibly identifiable. The Marines, with their optics, could specifically target these leadership figures. Decapitating the command structure at range before the battle even truly begins would be devastating to Mongol morale and coordination. Let's say the Mongols attempt their typical harassment approach. Light cavalry with bows, probing the Marine position from 400 to 500 yards. They might think they can stay at safe distance while peppering the Marines with arrows. But here's the problem with that strategy. Steppe bows don't outrange M4 rifles. Tests have shown that the effective range of Mongol composite bows, despite what the secret history of the Mongols claims, doesn't exceed modern rifle range. The Marines can engage harassment archers with accurate fire, while the Mongols' arrows fall short or arrive with insufficient energy to penetrate body armor at that distance. As the harassment archers start taking casualties, the Mongol commanders would likely attempt one of their most famous tactics, the feigned retreat. This is how the Mongols won the majority of their historical battles. Pretend to break and run, lure the enemy into pursuing, then turn and destroy them when they're disorganized. But this wouldn't work on the Marines. They're in a defensive position, and they have no reason to abandon it. When the Mongols stopped their retreat and wheel around for the real assault, they'd face the exact same devastating volley all over again. This early fighting, before any major charge even happens, could kill around 20% of the entire Mongol army. Now let's say the Mongols then commit to a full assault. They charge from 500 yards out. Here's where we need to correct a common misconception. Mongol horses weren't as fast as modern horses. These were hardy steppe ponies, built for endurance rather than speed. At full gallop, they'd cover about 10 yards per second, maybe 15 to 20 yards per second for a very short sprint. But approaching 500 yards under fire, that's not a short sprint. That's an extended run under the most terrifying conditions imaginable. This gives the Marines roughly 35 to 45 seconds of engagement time from when the charge begins until Mongols reach close range. Let's think about what happens in that time frame. The M240B machine guns open up immediately. 3 machine guns firing sustained bursts, let's say 700 rounds per minute each to avoid overheating issues. That's 2,100 rounds per minute, or roughly 35 rounds per second. Over 40 seconds of sustained fire, we're looking at 5,000 to 6,000 machine gun rounds downrange. Even with a conservative 20% hit rate against charging cavalry, that's 1,000 to 1,200 Mongols dropped by machine gun fire alone. The 40 riflemen are also engaging. Marines are trained to maintain accuracy under stress, and against mass targets at ranges from 500 down to 100 yards, they'd be firing almost continuously, maybe 30 to 40 rounds per Marine during this engagement. That's another 1,200 to 1,600 rounds, with hit rates climbing as range decreases. At 500 yards, maybe 15% hit rate. At 300 yards, 30%. At 150 yards, 50%. Conservatively, that's another 400 to 500 Mongols down from rifle fire.
Now add the M203 grenade launchers. Each rifle squad has grenadiers with 40mm launchers that can reach out 350 to 400 meters. Against cavalry, a single 40mm grenade detonating in a formation could kill or wound multiple riders and cause horses to panic and bolt. The Marines might have 6 to 8 grenadiers, with maybe 10 to 15 rounds each. Fired into the charging mass before they close to 100 yards, that's dozens of explosions ripping through the Mongol formation. Conservatively, that's another 100 to 150 Mongols neutralized, plus additional casualties from panicked horses, trampling or throwing riders. Here's what we're looking at. Before the Mongols even reach close range, they've lost 1,500 to 2,000 warriors. That's 15 to 20% casualties in less than a minute of fighting. Historical data shows that cavalry charges typically break when they take 20 to 30% losses. The Mongols were renowned for discipline, but asking warriors to continue charging into fire that's cutting down 1 in 5 of their companions requires extraordinary courage, or desperation. But let's say the Mongols press on. They're within 50 yards now. This is where things get truly chaotic. The Mongols are finally in effective bow range, and they're returning fire. Mongol horse archers could fire 6 to 8 arrows per minute while riding, and at close range, they're dangerously accurate. The Marines have body armor that'll stop most arrows to the torso, but faces, necks, arms, and legs are exposed. The Marines would start taking casualties.
This is also when hand grenades become viable. Marines can throw M67 fragmentation grenades 30 to 40 meters. If even half the Marines throw a single grenade into the closing formation, 20 grenades with a casualty radius of 15 meters each, that's another 60 to 80 Mongols down, plus more horses panicking. But realistically, at this point, if the Mongols have already taken 20% casualties, the charge is likely breaking. Historical precedent from countless cavalry engagements shows that mounted warriors, no matter how brave, break when losses reach that threshold. The combination of the apocalyptic noise, the impossible accuracy of Marine fire, the explosions, seeing comrades and horses torn apart by weapons that sound like continuous thunder, it would be overwhelming. The Mongols might make it to the Marine line, but it wouldn't be an organized charge of 10,000 warriors. It would be maybe 1,000 to 2,000 survivors from the initial assault wave, psychologically shattered, horses panicked, commanders dead, and formations in complete disarray. Against 43 Marines in prepared positions with interlocking fields of fire, that's not enough to overrun the position, especially when the Marines still have hundreds of rounds remaining and more grenades. The psychological impact can't be overstated. Even if Mongol commanders had warned their warriors about Marine capabilities, the reality of experiencing it would be infinitely worse than any description. So the first assault fails. The Mongols retreat beyond 500 yards, regroup, and assess. They've lost 2,000 warriors, including significant command personnel. What do they do next?
The thing is, Mongol commanders were brilliant tacticians. They'd recognize that direct charges are suicide, so they'd adapt. But their adaptation is limited by their technology. They might attempt to attack at night, but the Marines have night vision goggles. The Mongols would be attacking blind while the Marines see perfectly. The Mongols might try to surround the position and wait, which brings us to logistics. Food and water are even more critical than ammunition. Marines carry maybe 2 to 3 days of rations and water. The Mongols, by contrast, have access to their herds, can hunt, and can forage. They could literally surround the Marine position and wait. No resupply is coming. The Marines would face a choice: try to break out and get run down by cavalry, or stay in position and slowly starve. The Mongols might also use fire. They were known to use fire arrows and smoke to flush out entrenched enemies.
On open grassland, starting grass fires upwind of the Marine position could force them to move or suffocate. The Marines have no defense against this.
There is one major advantage the Marines have that we haven't fully explored: night operations. The Mongols have no capability to fight effectively in the darkness. Even with moonlight, coordinating 10,000 cavalry at night would be nearly impossible. The Marines, however, have night vision goggles. If the Marines attempted to break out of encirclement at night, moving under cover of darkness, they could potentially slip through Mongol lines. But where would they go? On foot, covering maybe 20 miles per night, the Mongols would catch up the next day. The Marines would need to reach some kind of fortified position, friendly territory, or terrain so difficult that cavalry can't operate. Dense forest, mountains, or swamps. If such terrain is within a few days' march, the Marines might make it. If not, the Mongols eventually run them down. Let's imagine the Marines do make it to a forest. This dramatically changes the tactical situation. In dense woods, cavalry loses most of its advantages. The Mongols would have to dismount and fight on foot, where they're less effective. The Marines could use hit-and-run tactics, ambushes from concealment, and their night vision to attack Mongol camps after dark. This becomes a guerrilla war, and the Marines are suddenly much more dangerous.
But even in favorable terrain, the numbers are overwhelming. The Mongols would eventually locate the Marines, surround their position, and cut off escape routes. And the Marines still face the logistics problem. No food, no resupply, limited ammunition. Eventually, they'd run out of both bullets and options. Winner, the Mongols.
The verdict. Bottom line, in a straight-up fight on open terrain, the Marines could inflict devastating casualties, potentially killing 1,000 to 2,000 Mongols. But they'd ultimately be overwhelmed by numbers, outmaneuvered by cavalry mobility, and starved out by logistics limitations. The Mongols would win through patience, encirclement, and their massive numerical advantage. If the Marines reach defensible terrain like forests or mountains and adopt guerrilla tactics, they could survive longer, maybe weeks or even months. But eventually, the lack of resupply, the impossibility of maintaining high-tech equipment in medieval conditions, and the sheer persistence of 10,000 skilled warriors would tip the scales. The Mongols would win. The only scenario where the Marines could actually win would require them to somehow link up with friendly forces, secure a resupply source, or accomplish a specific limited objective, like assassinating a Mongol Khan before escaping. In a war of attrition with no support against one of history's most fearsome armies at their peak, 43 Marines simply don't have enough bullets, food, or time. Technology gives them a chance to survive longer than any other 43-person force in history could manage. But numbers, mobility, and logistics would ultimately decide the outcome in the Mongols' favor.